have another show today on hoarding, on what individuals and communities can do effectively to tackle this problem. Here, Harriet Bakalar and Laurie Lutomski. Just how creative do you have to be in trying to help someone who has a problem with hoarding stuff?
Well, we were talking in the last show about cleaning out a corner of a room to begin that way rather than a whole area. And one of the things I was thinking about is if you were cleaning out a corner of someone's kitchen and they now lived alone as opposed to how they used to live, you see that there are 10 frying pans. Well, one of the ways to approach this is to say, you know, you're living by yourself now, you really don't need 10 frying pans. Why don't you help us decide which frying pan or 2 you might want to keep, or which one is your favorite? That's right. So then you put out the 10 frying pans and you make some selections between the 10 frying pans. Same thing with the client may have 3 microwaves. Gee, do you really need 3 microwaves, or do you think 1 would work? So you just sort of approach it piece by piece by piece, and you think of creative interventions as you're looking at the room and identifying what the issues are.
You know, I noticed just in the way you described that, was an interesting technique, and maybe it was similar to what you were saying in the last show, and that is to not be judgmental. You're asking open-ended questions, aren't you?
Right, right. But I'm asking open-ended questions that I know what the response is going to be to them.
What happens if they don't respond?
If someone were to say, well, no, I need all 10 frying pans.
Yeah, how do you deal with that?
I would say, remember what we're doing here is trying to make your kitchen more usable. And it's okay with me if you have 10 frying pans, but let's take a look at the rest of the kitchen and what you think you don't need. Mm-hmm. And the more you work in the kitchen or whatever the area is, the more those 10 frying pans become a stumbling block because there are too many of them. You can't really clean out unless you move some of them. Mm-hmm. But the client has to be able to see that. It can't come from you. They have to be able to see that they need less of that, whatever that is.
When you work with clients, do you give them homework after you leave?
Absolutely. When we work with people, we start off by establishing a good relationship, what Harriet just described. If they want to keep all 10 frying pans, they can do that. And sometimes they're testing us. Do you really mean that I can decide what I get to keep? And once that happens, then we can say to them, you know, I'm going to be back next week, or I'm going to be back in 2 days. Can you fill this box so that when I get here, I can just move it to the car, and then we'll start from there.
That's a good idea.
Things that are finite, so they don't feel like it's overwhelming. Like I would never leave and say, I want this cupboard cleaned out, or remember you said you'd clear the table, because that's not a finite task that they can accomplish and then feel good about. Mm-hmm. It also gives them more control, because when I say fill the box, they can decide what that means. And they may again test to see if I'm really just going to come in and pick up the box and move it to my car, even if there's only 4 or 5 things in it.
The pictures that we saw in the last show and some that are being shown, I think, on this show, some of these are seemingly insurmountable amounts of stuff. So I would imagine an individual would just have a difficult time even knowing how to attack it. You help in those kind of ways as well? Are there some good techniques to use?
We try to help them stay focused on small areas at a time so that they can actually see progress. If you try to focus on an entire room and people are scattered from one thing to another thing, then they're never going to see any progress, and it's going to feel futile, and they'll want to give up, because it is a huge task that's going to take a long period of time. None of us think this is going to happen in a week or a month or even a year. Sometimes it's going to take longer than that. But we do find that people pick up speed and they're able to get rid of more things the longer that they work at it. In the beginning, it's very slow. Mm-hmm. But eventually they'll start to feel like it's okay to let go of bigger amounts of things. And they like the fact that they can use their table now, that
right.
they can sit in their chair, that
right.
they can sleep in their bed, and they see the benefits that are coming from that slow and steady removal, and that no one's going to tell them what they have to get rid of. We're just going to simply say, we need to find a way to make a 36-inch pathway. You decide what I take out so that can happen.